Hello everyone, I'm your host Griffin, and today's topic is serious Redditors who had arranged marriage. Was sex awkward initially? How did you break the ice? Please consider subscribing if you enjoy the video. I met my husband 3 months before my wedding. We went on a few dates before the wedding. How was the wedding night? Pretty nice, since we'd both come directly from the wedding. We needed to shower. He took a shower first, then I did. It was about 2 AM before we finally got started. It wasn't awkward at all, a bit painful, but not really awkward. First orgasm came a few days later on a train in France for our honeymoon. 20 years later, we've got a house full of children to prove that the sex has been both enjoyable and plentiful. My wife was picked by my father's family in a move of desperation. We had little money to work with during Jordan's economic down, and we needed the marriage to get government money. The girl my dad chose was very quiet and awkward. She had already found other men in her life and had made a point to tell me I could never satisfy. I tried to at least get along with her, but she never decided to like me. Our marriage eventually failed and it cost my family a great deal of money. My parents and aunt arranged a marriage for me and I traveled back to my country, met her once before the marriage. First night she was really shy and kept hiding under the blanket and pulling it away from me while giggling. Nothing happened that night. Then she got a call the next day from her mother and they kept talking for half an hour. It happened then later that night when we were in bed innocently watching TV. Then she looked at me and said maybe the first complete sentence. I don't know what I'm supposed to do in a nervous voice, so I laughed and played it funny, then started gently kissing, hugging, and joked a bit. Then 2 hours later we are doing it and now I've 2 kids from her and she turned 26 last month. Arranged isn't as bad as it sounds. But back in my place it's normal to have arranged marriages and even marriages without seeing the bride. Mine was great considering there are parents who wait outside the room to have the daughter orgasm to make sure she's virgin. From a Muslim standpoint, I had an arranged marriage, but it really wasn't all that arranged. I met my wife through a family friend. We were introduced. Our families were introduced. And we spent about a year getting to know each other. Both of us, at either point, could have decided we were not interested. But we fell very much in love and got married. We discussed sex, contraception, etc. prior to getting married, so it wasn't a foreign topic. When we finally ended up having sex, day after our wedding night, we were way too exhausted that night. We took our time and went slow. It was very much enjoyable for both of us and we have sex nearly daily now. A year in, we were both virgins and had zero experience doing anything sexual with the opposite sex. Looking back now, I am really glad I got to experience all of that with her and only her. It makes it that much more special to me. This all happened April last year, and it is 100% true. My wife is from a Muslim country originally, but her family is from the capital and quite modern. She has relatives however from a smaller village who are not quite as modern, so one of her second cousins, son of dad's cousin, wants to get married because it is time already and he wants children. His mom interviews a few girls but it took a while. Some of the girls she didn't like because they weren't traditional enough. And some of the girls' families didn't want because the guy's family was too strict. Even for a small village, things like the girl having to be Muslim, must wear hijab, pray 5 times a day, the whole ordeal. Finally they find a girl who suits him. His mom approves and girl's parents approve, so they organized the wedding for like 2 weeks after. Sadly because of that I couldn't go. We live in Western Europe and I need to tell my vacation days in advance. At least more than 2 weeks, but she could arrange it with her work to go for the wedding. My wife told me about the wedding. It was super traditional Muslim wedding, which I would have loved to see because I have never been to one, although it was hard for me to understand a wedding without any alcohol. So the wedding happens and it ends early and everyone goes home to rest and sleep. My wife and his family, parents and sister, go to the hotel which is an hour away. Then my wife's dad gets a call. I should say before that my wife's dad is very well considered in his extended family because he has a very good job in the center and works with high-profile people. Basically a very respectable man. It was maybe 1 AM and he gets a call from his older sister saying that he needs to go back to the village immediately. There is an emergency. Him expecting it to be about money. He gets asked for money quite often. Demands to know what is going on. So here is fun part. The groom was a very traditional Muslim man. He had never had a date, never gone out with a girl, and followed his religion in a very strict way. He had barely talked to women in the past. The bride has followed a similar path, so they finish the ceremony. They go to the room. and they realize they have absolutely no idea how to proceed. Like these people did not know how to have sex. They had never watched a porn film. They never had sex education. No one thought to tell them what they would have to do in bed. They are there wondering what to do now. So they call this aunt, who is the eldest of the family, to tell them what to do. But the aunt feels that a woman cannot possibly describe to a man how to have sex. That is so inappropriate. So instead she calls her younger brother, my father-in-law. My Phil doesn't want to hear about that crap. He is 1 hour away and it is really barely any of his business. It is late and he works the next day. Also, there must be many others more suitable for that kind of thing. At this point my wife and her mom and sister are cracking up because they cannot believe this is happening on 2013. And the thing is, no one expected this, otherwise they would have taken precautions. So my Phil tells them to try to find someone else, and if not he will go. But thankfully they contact one of the guests, who was a mullah. Not sure I spelled that right. Like a religious figure. Who agrees to go and explain to the guy what to do with his wife so they can consummate the marriage. But it doesn't end there. Like a week later my wife comes and tells me that apparently something happened. Because the next days the bride was seen walking funny. And apparently they had to contact a gynecologist because something had happened during the wedding night that actually hurt the poor girl. We never got to know what was it that he did. Or they tried. That went wrong. Or the outcome after. Keep in mind this is really embarrassing for them, so they tried to keep it as low as possible. We only found out because they called my Phil first to try to go talk to the guy. So obviously this was in a very rural area in a small village of a Muslim country. Very hard to understand for many of us, but it is one of my favorite stories that I heard. I doubt this happens in many arranged marriages. But hey, it happened in at least once. And last year, too. Hi, my first marriage was arranged-ish. My husband family made an arrangement with my father when I was 12 that I would marry their middle son, who was 2 years older than me when I was a teen and had finished school. I knew him already. His sister was my best friend and he was friends with my brothers. We never talked much till we made our engagement official, and he had paid me my mahar, and in the about 6 months between our engagement and our wedding we hung out and went on dates, talked on the phone, got to know each other personally. I grew to like him a lot. I wouldn't go so far as to say that I loved him. I grew to love him eventually, and he was a very nice, caring, sweet guy and treated me well. He supported me going to university. We had a good life together. We loved traveling together. We both loved photography. We had been talking about having kids when I was finished with university. We weren't married very long, only 2 years before he died in a car accident. I think we could have made things work with more time. As far as your question, sex was fine. We were both virgins when got married. I tried doing what I saw in porn, but it didn't work out too well. But like all things, we got better with practice. P.S. I am from Jordan. Grew up mostly in South Korea in the US. Sunni Muslim at the time of this, atheist now. I currently live in Korea with my new husband. Not arranged. I met him at a party. Our 2-year-old son and our dog. Throwaway because I'm a loser. Like a fool, I opted for an arranged marriage on the rebound. The girl I was originally seeing was batshit crazy, but something strange happens when you get rejected. More so than the hurt. You become incapable of making good decisions. Anyhow, was introduced to a girl. She had different interests, a different outlook on life, and didn't take too kindly to my casual humor. So like an idiot I got engaged to her. Over the course of the engagement I was really busy with work, so didn't see her at all. Then came the marriage. It was surreal. There I was sitting on stage with a girl I hardly knew getting married. Most of the frikers at the wedding were my parents' friends etc. I hardly knew anyone there. Fast forward to the honeymoon. We were like awkward strangers. We actually never had sex on our honeymoon. Was the sex awkward? You're damn right it was. Fast forward 6 years later and we have a child. Did I make the right decision? If I wasn't a father I'd leave tomorrow. I wouldn't let my parents choose my socks. But I let them choose my life partner. The loser that I am. So why am I sticking around? To cut a long story short, I want my child to do well in life. So I'm living an act. Do I have regrets? Don't we all? Am I a good husband? I never argue, never complain and put on a smiling face. Have I fricked my life up? Not totally. I earn quite a lot, and unlike the bullshit you hear in the movies, money gives you great options in life. And I try to enjoy as much of it as possible. Throwaway here for some reasons that will become clear in a minute. I'll give a little background to how the whole thing came about to put having sex with my first cousin into context. Spoiler alert, my marriage was arranged-ish, in that it was not love-based, initially. So, I'm of Pakistani descent. I was born in the UK as was my mum, but my dad is from Pakistan. He moved here when he married my mum at 22 years old, so generally speaking we, as a family, as quite British. Recently I finished my degree and I had been working for a couple of years, at which point my mum and dad asked me if I wanted to get married. In Pakistani culture it is not expected that your children go out and date or whatever. Standard practices usually for parents of the children to discuss marriage plans on behalf of the children, and the level of involvement varies between cultures, ethnicity, religion, etc. Anyway, my mum said she had thought about the possibility of me marrying my cousin, I'm the dude in this scenario by the way, and asked me what I thought. I was initially pretty grossed out by it, but she asked me to mull over the decision for a while. A couple of months later my mum said that my aunt, said that my cousin, now wife, is willing to chat to me about it if I am. Turns out she was actually playing me at this point, because my wife hadn't been told about this at all, but my aunt was potentially on board with the possibility, so she did this to get me to make up my mind quickly, which I did, and I agreed to meet at some point. After all, she was hot, yeah? I know that sounds gross to you. We met up and had the most awkward first date ever conceived in the history of mankind, where basically we discussed virtually every aspect of normal dating into one 3-hour dinner where we basically discussed our likes, dislikes, what we find attractive in the other person, personality traits, etc. Like I said, super awkward. At the end of the dinner we had literally agreed to marry each other, which was the surrealist experience of my life. Afterwards I talked about it with my brother and sister, who had apparently known about this plan for me and her to marry before I did, and they've been poking fun of me ever since. One of the really weird things I found out about that dinner is that she is apparently super horny, which is something pretty strange to find out about your cousin. And about 2 weeks after our engagement we had been talking a bit, and I sent her some semi-lewd innuendo texts which eventually blew into full-blown sexting. Yes, 2 weeks after I agreed to marry my cousin we were sexting on a regular basis. Also about this point I found out that she knows nothing about sex. Now we were both virgins, but the fact that she had never had an orgasm and wanted to give BJs with condoms on sounds weird to me, but hey. A couple of weeks later I sent her some non-explicit nude shots and we trade back and forth. A couple of weeks after that she comes over to my house and we make out under the guise of going to the supermarket to get onions. At this point I would like to state how surprisingly cool my parents were with all of this. Going into this all I assumed, since we are all pretty religious, that we would be banned from seeing each other until the wedding or something, but we were allowed to act pretty freely and it was implied that we knew we couldn't have sex. A little while later making out turns to groping/rubbing over other/underwear, and a little while later we were sending each other full-blown nude pics/videos. This would have been about 6 months after we were engaged. This continued on for another 6 months until we got married. The actual wedding night the sex wasn't awkward per se, the actual act was. Like physically doing it after talking about it for almost a year, but in terms of breaking the ice or anything we didn't have that problem because we were super horny for each other at this point. I am a victim of arranged marriage. I used to live in US and my parents are in India. My parents arranged the marriage. They saw the girl, liked her and family, so fixed the marriage. They told me after they did everything. She was beautiful and educated, so I didn't mind. I did talk to her on the phone multiple times before we got married, but it wasn't the same. Fast forward first night after we got married. Every time I wanted to touch her she moved away. I thought she is just scared. She was 4 years younger than me, so I didn't try much. Next day she said she is virgin and scared. So I thought to wait it out. I waited for a whole month as she said she will get intimate once she came to US to live with me. She did come here after a few days but left without even meeting me. Apparently she has premarital affair. That was the reason she didn't let me touch her that way. After she went back she went MIA for 3 months. After that she emailed me to get divorced and asked a lot of money from me. So to answer your question, I don't know if actual sex was awkward, but my whole arranged marriage was. Throwaway and places changed for safety. I'm of Punjabi and Indian origin and have recently got into an introduced marriage. We dated for a few months before giving a decision. We're currently at the engaged phase. I agreed to have one purely out of respect for my parents, who have given everything for me and have never restricted me in the way I have seen other families do. The missus in question is the daughter of a friend of a brother-in-law of an aunt. We come from the same community with respect that our great-great-great-great-great-great-grandfathers shared a similar career. So far it has been awkward. Whilst we're born and raised in Canada, I would consider myself quite westernized when it comes to dating and relationships with the opposite sex whilst she isn't. Pretty sure she's a virgin while I'm most certainly not. I was a bit of a man slut back in the day. The problem is I can't approach the topic with her because she seems very immature to these sorts of things. Every time bring up kissing, which we have done, she goes into a fit of giggles. So there's no chance of a frank discussion about sex. She's a lovely person. We don't share the same interests or hobbies or even the sense of humor. My humor is quite crude and dark, possibly thanks to Reddit, but I do believe that it's good to have some sort of variety in a relationship. I do consider myself very lucky to have met my other half. So if I had the chance to go back to my previous promiscuous existence or choose her, I would choose her every time. In fact, part of the reason I said yes was to lock that down, so to speak. So, given that the wedding is not till April 2016 and I've broken it off with the frick buddy I had in the interest of being faithful, I'm resigned to 2 years of being intimate with my right hand. I've had to come to the conclusion that, although it's a huge part of an adult relationship, sex isn't everything. Please subscribe if you like the video. It really helps the channel to grow. Adios.